The Innovator's Solution: Creating and Sustaining Successful Growth by Clayton M. Christensen and Michael E. Raynor. Ever wonder why brilliant companies suddenly collapse? I'm not talking about the badly run ones. I mean the absolute powerhouses. The companies sitting pretty at the top, with genius teams, mountains of cash, and customers who'd follow them anywhere. Yet somehow, a scrappy little startup nobody's heard of comes out of nowhere and knocks them flat on their backs. It happens so often you'd think business success is just pure luck, like rolling dice at a casino. Take AT&T, for example. When the government broke them up in 1984, they were scrambling to figure out their next move. The executives noticed computers and phones were starting to merge, so they thought, let's build our own computer division. That experiment burned through hundreds of millions of dollars. Undeterred, they doubled down and bought the computer giant NCR for over $7 billion in 1991. A few years and billions more in losses later, they sold it for pennies on the dollar. But they needed growth, desperately. So they dropped over $11 billion on McCaw Cellular, a massive wireless company. Within a few years, that investment was worth about two-thirds of what they'd paid. Still hungry for growth, they made their biggest bet yet, over $100 billion to become America's biggest cable operator, planning to revolutionize local phone service. Just a few years later, they dumped those assets for a staggering $40 billion loss. In barely a decade, AT&T, stuffed with smart, experienced people, had basically set tens of billions of dollars on fire trying to grow. And here's the kicker. They're not alone. Study after study reveals that maybe only 1 in 10 companies manages to sustain profitable growth over the long haul. Why is it so brutally hard? This question kept Clayton M. Christensen, one of Harvard Business School's brightest minds, up at night. He noticed something interesting. The usual explanations, that managers get lazy or scared of risk, just didn't match reality. These executives were often betting everything on massive, risky innovations. His groundbreaking first book, The Innovator's Dilemma, cracked the code on why this happens. He revealed something almost paradoxical. The exact things that make companies successful, listening carefully to their best customers, focusing obsessively on their most profitable products, are the very same things that blind them to the next wave of innovation and ultimately destroy them. But that incredible insight raised an even bigger question. Okay, if we know why great companies stumble, can we actually solve this puzzle? Is there a reliable, repeatable recipe for creating successful new growth? That's exactly what this book promises to deliver. The Innovator's Solution isn't about getting lucky or being a genius. It's about following a process. It takes us deep inside the mysterious world of innovation to show us that building a successful new business isn't just throwing darts blindfolded. It's actually a science. By the time we're done today, you'll understand the hidden forces that determine success and failure in business. Even better, you'll walk away with a practical playbook for becoming the disruptor instead of the disrupted. To really grasp the solution, we need to understand the problem at its core. And it all starts with a simple chart, a mental model that explains so much of what happens in the business world. Picture a graph in your mind. Time flows along the bottom, and performance, how good a product is, climbs up the side. Now imagine a gently sloping dotted line moving upward and to the right. This line shows the pace at which customers can actually absorb improvements in a product. Think about cars for a second. Automakers keep cranking out faster, more powerful engines. But between traffic jams and speed limits, we can't really use all that extra horsepower. There's a ceiling to how much improvement actually matters to us. Now add another line to your mental picture, a much steeper, solid line. This represents how fast companies innovate, constantly pushing out better and better products to sell for higher prices to their most demanding customers. See the problem? Technology almost always improves faster than people can use it. A product that was once not quite good enough eventually becomes way better than we actually need for most people. This gap creates space for two completely different types of innovation. The first type is sustaining innovation. This is the kind of progress we usually think about, making something good even better. It might be a small tweak or a massive breakthrough, but the goal is the same. Sell a better product to your best customers for more money. In this game, the big established players almost always win. They've got the resources, the motivation, and the customers who will pay for it. But then there's the second type, and this is where things get really interesting and dangerous. It's called disruptive innovation. Disruptive innovations don't try to make better products for existing customers in established markets. Instead, they introduce products that are actually worse than what's already out there. But here's the twist. They offer other advantages. They're typically simpler, more convenient, and way cheaper. They appeal to completely new customers who couldn't afford or didn't want the existing products, or they target the least demanding customers at the very bottom of the market. And here's where the magic happens. Once a disruptive product gains a foothold in these new or low-end markets, it starts improving relentlessly. And because technology improves faster than customers can absorb it, eventually that not good enough product becomes good enough. By then, it's game over for the old leaders. The disruptors crush them. Let me tell you a story that makes this crystal clear, the tale of the American steel industry. For decades, steel came from massive, billion-dollar factories called integrated mills. These behemoths did everything from processing raw iron ore to rolling out finished steel sheets. Then, in the 1960s, a much simpler technology appeared, the mini-mill. Mini-mills melted scrap steel in small electric furnaces, and they could produce steel at about 20% less cost than the giant integrated mills. You'd think every integrated mill would have jumped on this cheaper technology immediately, right? Not a single one did. Here's why. Because mini-mills used scrap steel of varying quality, the steel they produced initially wasn't very good. In fact, only one market would touch it: concrete reinforcing bars, or rebar. This was literally the dirtiest, lowest profit margin business in the entire steel industry. The big integrated mills were actually relieved to get rid of it. Rebar was cutthroat. For them, it made perfect sense to focus their investments on higher quality, higher margin steel products for customers like car manufacturers. But for the mini-mills, with their 20% cost advantage, selling rebar was fantastic business. They made excellent profits. So they attacked the rebar market aggressively, and the big mills happily fled, reconfiguring their factories to make fancier steel. Eventually, the mini-mills drove every single integrated mill completely out of the rebar market. Then, something predictable happened. With only low-cost mini-mills competing against each other, the price of rebar collapsed. The profits vanished. So what did the mini-mills do? They looked upward. The next step up was angle iron, bars and rods. This market was bigger, and the profit margins were nearly double what they could squeeze from rebar. So the mini-mills worked hard to improve their quality just enough to make these products. And the big integrated mills? They were relieved to dump that business too. Compared to their high-end sheet steel, angle iron was just another low-margin commodity. So they retreated upmarket again, abandoning more territory to the mini-mills. This exact pattern repeated itself over and over. The mini-mills climbed from rebar to angle iron, then to structural steel beams, and finally to high-quality sheet steel, the crown jewel of the big mills. At every step, the big mills made what seemed like a perfectly rational decision: abandon low-profit markets and focus on your best customers. They were motivated to run away, not fight, and that's the heart of both the innovator's dilemma and the innovator's solution. Disruption works because it's so much easier to beat competitors when they actually want to run away from you. This powerful dynamic is what Christensen calls asymmetric motivation. The opportunity that looks tiny and unattractive to a market leader is pure gold for a small disruptor. This isn't a story about incompetent management. It's about rational managers making logical decisions that lead their companies straight off a cliff. This explains why it's nearly impossible for a new company to win by launching a sustaining innovation, a better product, aimed at an established competitor's best customers. If you pick that fight, the big incumbent will be motivated to fight back with everything they've got, and they'll almost certainly destroy you. IBM, Kodak, GE, AT&T. All these giants failed when they tried to outmuscle an entrenched leader on a sustaining trajectory. The companies that beat them, like Canon toppling Xerox or PC makers crushing IBM, didn't win with frontal assaults. They won through disruption. So if you want to create a new growth business, your first and most critical step is shaping your idea into a disruptive strategy. There are two flavors of disruption you can pursue. The first is what we saw with the mini-mills, low-end disruption. This is where you target the most overserved customers at the bottom of a market with a good enough product at a lower price. These are customers paying for bells and whistles they don't actually need. Low-end disruption doesn't create a new market. It just serves an existing one more affordably and efficiently. The second type is even more powerful, new market disruption. This is where you target people who aren't customers at all. You compete against non-consumption. A new market disruption turns non-customers into customers by making a product so much more affordable and simple that a whole new population can suddenly own and use it. Think about Sony's first transistor pocket radio in 1955. Back then, radios were beautiful, high-fidelity furniture pieces made with vacuum tube technology by companies like RCA. That first transistor radio sounded tinny and awful in comparison. If Sony had tried selling it to adult audiophiles, they would have been laughed out of the building. But Sony didn't do that. They sold it to teenagers. Teenagers didn't own those expensive tabletop radios. Their alternative was no radio at all. For them, a cheap, portable radio they could use to listen to rock and roll away from their parents was absolutely magical. They were thrilled with a product the mainstream market considered garbage. Sony competed against non-consumption. They created a new market in a new context, portability, and big companies like RCA felt no pain because Sony wasn't stealing their customers. But just like the mini-mills, Sony relentlessly improved its technology. They went from pocket radios to portable TVs. By the time solid-state electronics were good enough to power high-quality home stereos and televisions, RCA and the other vacuum tube giants had simply evaporated. So how do you find these incredible disruption opportunities? The book reveals it's not about complex market analysis. It's about a fundamental shift in perspective. It's about understanding the job the customer is trying to get done. This is one of the most powerful ideas in the entire book. We don't just buy products, we hire them to do a job. And that job has functional, social, and emotional dimensions. The book shares a wonderful story about a fast food chain trying to sell more milkshakes. They did all the usual market research, brought in customers who fit the demographic profile of milkshake buyers and asked, how can we improve this? Should it be more chocolatey? Cheaper? Chunkier? They got clear feedback, made the changes, and nothing. Sales stayed flat. So they brought in a new researcher who took a different approach. He spent an entire day in a restaurant just watching who bought milkshakes, when they bought them, and what they did with them. He discovered something surprising. Nearly half the milkshakes were sold before 8:30 in the morning. The buyers were almost always alone, never bought anything else, and always drove away with it. So he interviewed these morning customers and asked, what job were you trying to get done when you hired that milkshake? Turns out they all had the same job. A long, boring commute to work. They needed something to make the drive more interesting, and something to keep hunger at bay until lunch. What was the milkshake competing against? From the customer's perspective, it wasn't other milkshakes, it was bagels. But those were messy and left crumbs everywhere. It was bananas, but those disappeared too quickly. It was donuts, which didn't last until 10 o'clock. A milkshake was actually perfect for the job. It took forever to suck through a thin straw, could be consumed cleanly with one hand, and was filling enough to last. The parents who bought milkshakes for their kids in the afternoon were hiring it for a completely different job, being a loving parent and keeping a child happy without a big fight. For that job, the thick, slow milkshake was actually terrible because kids took forever to finish it. When you segment a market by the job to be done, suddenly the path to innovation becomes obvious. To serve the morning commuter better, you'd make the shake even thicker, and maybe add tiny chunks of fruit to make the commute more interesting. For the parent and child job, you'd make a thinner, smaller shake that's quick and easy to finish. Understanding the job is the key to finding both a disruptive foothold and the right path for improvement. But a disruptive product alone isn't enough. You also need a disruptive business model. This means figuring out how to make attractive profits at the discount prices disruption requires. For low-end disruptions, this is everything. For new market disruptions, you need a cost structure that lets you make money serving a market previously considered too small or too poor to be profitable. A disruptive business model is incredibly valuable because as you move upmarket into higher price tiers, most of that extra revenue falls straight to your bottom line. This leads to another critical decision. What should your company do itself, and what should it outsource? Conventional wisdom says, focus on your core competence. But the book argues, this is a dangerous trap. Think about IBM when it created the first PC. It outsourced the microprocessor to a tiny company called Intel, and the operating system to another little outfit called Microsoft, so it could focus on its core competence of designing and assembling computers. In doing so, it handed over the two most profitable parts of the entire industry to others. So how do you know what to keep in-house? The answer depends on whether your product is not good enough or more than good enough for what customers need. When a product isn't good enough, when customers are demanding better performance, you have to build it yourself using a proprietary, tightly integrated architecture. You need to control every critical component to squeeze out every last bit of performance. This is why the early leaders in cars, Ford, computers, IBM, and photocopiers, Xerox, were all highly integrated companies. But once a product becomes more than good enough, once it overshoots what customers can actually use, the basis of competition changes. Now, speed, convenience, and customization become more important than raw performance. In this world, the advantage shifts to companies using a modular, open architecture. They can mix and match the best components from various suppliers to quickly assemble exactly what a customer wants. This shift from integrated to modular is what causes commoditization. When anyone can assemble the same standard parts, it becomes impossible to differentiate your product, and profits evaporate. This is what happened to PC assemblers. But here's the beautiful part: the law of conservation of attractive profits. When profits disappear at one stage of the value chain, they reappear somewhere else. As PC assembly became a commodity, the components inside the PC, the microprocessor and operating system, became where differentiation and enormous profits were possible. They were the subsystems that were still not good enough. The power to capture profit migrates to whichever part of the value chain isn't yet good enough. The secret is skating to where the money will be, not where it is now. Finally, even with the right strategy, customers, and business model, a new venture can fail if it's placed in the wrong part of the organization. An organization's capabilities are defined by three things: its resources, people, money, technology; its processes, the ways people work together; and its values, the criteria for setting priorities. A large, successful company has powerful processes and values perfectly tuned for sustaining innovation. But those same processes and values become disabilities when it comes to disruption. A disruptive project will always look too small, too low profit, and too distracting compared to the needs of the core business. It'll get filtered out by the resource allocation process. This is why an organization cannot disrupt itself. For disruption to succeed inside a large corporation, it must live in a separate, autonomous business unit with its own cost structure, processes, and values, a place where a small opportunity can be seen as a big win. The Innovator solution is more than just a business book. It's a completely new lens for seeing the world. Its lessons reach far beyond corporate boardrooms and can fundamentally change how you think about your own career and ideas. The most powerful lesson for me is realizing that the forces causing giants to fall aren't random acts of fate. They're predictable, almost like natural laws. And once you understand these laws, you can harness them. This transforms innovation from a terrifying leap of faith into something manageable, even predictable. It shows us that being small and under-resourced isn't a disadvantage when facing disruption. It's actually your greatest strength. Large incumbents are trapped by their own success, handcuffed by the very customers and profit models that made them great. You, as the small disruptor, are free. The Jobs to be Done framework is another profound insight. It's really a tool for empathy. It forces you to stop thinking about your product's features and start thinking about the progress a customer is trying to make in their life. When you ask, "What job is my customer hiring this product to do?" you unlock a completely new level of understanding. You see competition where you never saw it before, the milkshake competing with a banana, and you spot opportunities invisible to everyone else. So how can you start applying these ideas right now? Here are 3 simple actions. First, become an observer of non-consumption. Next time you see a complicated or expensive product or service, don't just think about who's using it. Ask yourself, who isn't using it, and why not? Is it too expensive? Too complicated? Requires special skills? In that gap between current users and non-users lies fertile ground for new market disruption. Second, start identifying the jobs in your own life. When you buy something, ask yourself what job you hired it to do. When you feel frustrated by a product, it's not the product failing. It's failing to do a job properly. These moments of frustration are seeds of innovation. A product that can solve that job better, more conveniently, or more affordably is a potential business. Third, look for the rebar in any industry. Find an industry dominated by big, successful companies and ask, what's their lowest margin, most annoying business segment? What customers are they secretly happy to lose? That's the perfect, undefended beachhead for low-end disruption. By starting there, you can build a profitable business while giants happily look the other way, unaware of the threat until it's far too late. In the end, this book delivers a message of profound optimism. It suggests that the power to create transformative growth and change isn't reserved for a select few with deep pockets and established power. Actually, the rules of the game are tilted in favor of the outsider, the newcomer, the person with a simpler, cheaper, more convenient solution for a problem everyone else is ignoring. That could be you. That was a summary of the Innovator solution by Clayton M. Christensen and Michael E. Raynor. We've explored the core ideas today, but I have to be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. The real magic happens when you actually travel there yourself. The book is filled with stories, details, and nuances that simply can't be captured in a brief overview. It's in those quiet moments when a specific example or simple turn of phrase connects with your own experience in an unexpected way. This summary is your map, designed to help you decide if this is a journey worth taking. If anything we've talked about today has sparked your curiosity, I genuinely encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning a new theory. It's an experience that can fundamentally change how you see the world of business and your own potential within it. You'll find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable on your journey to learn from the best minds in business, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to the Billionaire's Bookshelf. That way you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book. Let's keep building our wisdom together.